UFC 292 betting and DraftKings show. We have an exciting weekend of combat sports in Boston, Massachusetts lined up for us. We got $200,000 to first place on DraftKings. I'm Jon Kelly. Let's hear the picks. Kicking things off in the women's flyweight division, we have Karine Silva, a minus 155 favorite with the comeback on Marina Moroz at plus 135. And right off the bat, I have interest in Marina Moroz as an underdog here. She's one of the few underdogs on this slate that I think is very live to win. I think that for a couple reasons. We'll start on the Silva side. She's very dangerous prospect, has a big overhand right that she'll look to land with power. She's got an opportunistic submission grappling game where she's submitted multiple opponents over the course of her career. She's 2-0 in the UFC with 2 first-round finishes. But the times where we did see, and there hasn't been many, but the few times where we did see her fights get extended, she certainly starts to slow down. I worry about the gas tank. I also worry if that early finish doesn't materialize. I don't think she's a good round winner. You know, she's historically pretty low volume on the feet. I mentioned the power, but she's not really going to touch you up too many times. And she's willing to go for that guillotine, get taken down, play off her back for extended periods. She's facing somebody in Marina Moroz who's never been finished in the course of her career, and she's fought some of the better fighters in the division, so she's extremely durable. She's very well-rounded. She can mix in the grappling as well. I definitely see a world where Silva might look good early and potentially threaten to finish, but if she doesn't pull it off, Moroz is definitely going to take over as the fight gets extended. So I'm leaning with the underdog here. I think Moroz gets it done. Moroz by decision is the official pick, and I do have interest on DraftKings as well. Which brings us to our next fight, which is in the women's flyweight division as well, as Natalia Silva comes in as a minus 355 favorite. The comeback on Andrea KGB Lee is plus 280. And even though it does seem like a big price tag here on Silva right off the bat, I do think she is the rightful favorite here. Natalia Silva is a very explosive striker. You know, she's very well-rounded as well. She's shown the ability to mix in the ground game, and most of the times where she was finished came very early on the regional scene. We've certainly seen her improve over the course of her career, and she's still young and still getting better. I think on the feet, she's one of the more dangerous strikers in the division, and I know it's kind of early to say that, but I honestly think she's a bad matchup for almost anybody. And Andrea Lee, while she's been competitive over her last, 5-6 fights, she's never getting blown out, and that's good for a floor at 6,800. And I think people will have interest in the dog on DraftKings, but I just have a hard time seeing her win this fight. And to be honest with you, I think in terms of the striking, she's going to get pieced up here. Andrea Lee, she's very high volume as well. I think she might try to match the pace. She's got a solid jab. She can mix in the leg kicks and maybe mix in the takedowns. But where she struggled is her striking defense. A lot of her fights, she's getting boxed up. Even though she's landing her offense, she's getting hit quite a bit as well, even when she's having success. And in terms of the grappling, we've seen her just get out-muscled by a lot of her opponents. And I know there's been an argument. I thought she won her last fight against Macy Barber. I think she's been robbed multiple times over the course of her career. But I also I don't really see how she's able to beat Silva here. I think she's going to be losing on the feet, and I don't trust her to be the better grappler, the more stronger girl when they get in the clinch. So for those reasons, I think Silva is the rightful favorite. I think Silva by decision is the most likely outcome. So in terms of DraftKings, Silva's 9,400. I don't really see a ceiling there. I think there's better fighters to target above and below her on DraftKings. So naturally, I'll probably have more exposure to Lee as the underdog. But again, I do think she loses, probably puts up like 30 points or so in a loss. We're going Silva by decision as the official pick. Which brings us to our next matchup in the middleweight division, as Andre Petrovsky comes in as a minus 250 favorite with Gerald Meerschaert on the comeback at plus 205. And this is a great fight to target on DraftKings. The first two I didn't have a ton of interest in. I think this one, you definitely want to have exposure to both sides, because obviously if Meerschaert's able to pull off the upset, we know what his path to victory is. It's going to come with the submission, and even when he's giving up minutes, he's always live to pull off that hero type of submission. So it wouldn't be the craziest thing, but I do think I lean with the Petrovsky side. I think on the feet, he's clearly the more explosive striker, going to have a massive power advantage here. Don't trust the durability of Gerald Meerschaert. Petrovsky also comes from a collegiate wrestling background, averages nearly 5.5 takedowns per 15 minutes. That's kind of the worry, though, is because he's so willing to get in those grappling exchanges, and now you're doing it against somebody with 27 career submission victories, and that's literally the only way that Meerschaert can win. So I'm not going to rule out Meerschaert here just being able to catch Petrovsky in something, but I do think the overwhelming majority of the time Petrovsky probably finds the knockout here. We're going Petrovsky by TKO. That's the official pick, and I'm going to have exposure to both sides on DraftKings. And up next, we have the Ultimate Fighter finale in the lightweight division as Austin Hubbard comes in as a -175 favorite. The comeback on Kurt Hollabaugh is +150. And this is a matchup where I do think Hubbard is the rightful favorite here. I don't have a ton of interest on DraftKings because I do think most of the time this probably hits the judges' scorecards, and I just think there's better fights to target really up and down the card. You know, neither of these guys I think have much of a ceiling. I do side with Hubbard just because I think at this stage in his career, he's still kind of improving. You know, he trains out of Elevation Fight Team. And even though he didn't have a good run in the UFC, he last fought against Vince Pichel a couple years ago, lost the decision there. Outside of that fight, you know, he's really been facing a ton of good grapplers in the UFC, and he's improved his takedown defense. He's tough to submit. He's very durable as well. He's just a well-rounded guy, you know, not a guy that's going to blow you off the page, but just a very solid fighter pretty much wherever the fight goes. And then on the flip side, Hollabaugh, I think, has a little bit more finishing potential, but I think it's pretty clear his best days are behind him. You know, his highlight of being in the UFC was when he dropped Shane Burgos, and then Burgos ended up submitting him. He never actually booked a win in the UFC, and I just think at this stage in his career, you know, he turns 37 years old next month. Like, I'm just not backing him in this spot. I'm not backing Hubbard either. I'm interested in the overs once it gets released on a couple more books. I do think this goes to decision, so that'll probably be the only way that I play it, and I'm going to look to be underweight on both sides on DraftKings. Next fight up in the middleweight division, we have Gregory Rodriguez, a -355 favorite. The comeback on Dennis Ty-Lulin is +280, and Gregory Rodriguez kind of burned everybody when he got knocked out in the first round by Bruno Ferreira his last time out, and that's really the one concern with Rodriguez is his durability. We've now seen him hurt and knocked out multiple times. That's really his only leak, aside from just maybe not fighting the smartest game plan at times, but he does have power on the feet as well. He loves to brawl. He holds a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He mixes in the takedown occasionally. We obviously prefer him to mix in the grappling a little bit more, and I think that's clearly his path to victory here against Dennis Ty-Lulin, who's basically just a one-punch power kind of guy. 9 of his 10 wins have come by knockout. The majority of them have come early, and he's just never been able to grapple. You know, he struggles to defend takedowns. Once you take him down, he gives up his back. He's been submitted multiple times in the course of his career. So I think that's clearly the easiest way that Rodriguez can win this fight. The problem is, like I mentioned, you can't really trust Rodriguez to fight optimally. So I'm sure he's going to make this harder than it needs to be, but I do think he's the side here. I think he gets his hand raised. We're going Rodriguez by submission. That's the official pick, and this is another good fight to target on DraftKings. Which brings us to our featured bout on the prelims as Brad Tavares comes in as a big favorite here at -270 with Chris Weidman on the comeback at +220. And the main thing being in this fight is Chris Weidman is coming off that brutal leg injury that he suffered against Uriah Hall a couple years ago. So now he's coming off over a 2-year layoff. He's almost 40 years old. It seems like to me his body just can't take the damage at this stage in his career, and that's definitely a concern. And then you factor in the long layoff as well. I didn't think he looked great his previous couple of fights. You know, even that win he had against Amari Akhmedov, he looked gassy and slow in that fight. I do think he is at least a little bit washed here, maybe even more than a little bit, whereas Brad Tavares has never been a guy that I like to back as a big favorite because he kind of fights on thin margins. He's a very skilled fighter, very technical kickboxer, but he doesn't put a ton of volume out there, doesn't have a ton of finishing power either, and he rarely looks to grapple. So he just kind of needs those big moments. It's tough to bank on him to win rounds, but he is very difficult to take down. He's got good takedown defense, and I think that's key in this matchup against Chris Weidman, who I think needs to mix in the wrestling here to have success, and I'm not sure that he's going to be able to do that. And I think on the feet, Tavares is going to be the faster fighter. I think that's going to be clear in these striking exchanges, and I just don't trust the durability of Chris Weidman at this stage. He's been knocked out all 6 times he's lost. It's been by TKO. I think Tavares, even though he's not known as a finisher, probably gets the knockout here. We're going Tavares by TKO. That's the official pick. And before we get to the main card, guys, do me a favor real quick, hit the like button and hit that subscribe button. I do videos like this every single week for UFC and Dana White's Contender Series. All I ask is that you take the 2 seconds, hit the like button. I definitely appreciate it. Now back to the fights. And kicking off the main card, we have Marlon Cheeto Vera, a minus 185 favorite with a comeback on Pedro Munoz at plus 154. And this is a matchup where I think it's going to deliver in terms of entertainment value. I'm just not sure that it's going to deliver in terms of DraftKings value. And I think because both of these fighters are kind of, well-known names, I think they can kind of both be over-owned relative to what I think they should be. Cheeto Vera, very durable, very explosive fighter, kind of needs to build into fights. He's historically a slow starter. Now he's only working with 3 rounds here. So I don't know if the ceiling's quite there. He's not facing somebody that has, durability issues. Pedro Munoz, despite being rocked a couple times, he's super durable. He's never been finished in the course of his career. On the flip side, Cheeto, obviously probably the most durable guy in the division, never been finished either. So I think this is going to be one that's competitive, especially early. Both guys great leg kickers. I think I lean with Cheeto due to the power, and I just think he has more potential to kind of look like the favorite here. And so I side with him in this matchup, but I'm not interested in laying the chalk on him here because I do think the fight is pretty competitive here, and I'm going to be underweight to the field on DraftKings just because I think he could be a little bit over-owned because of how popular he is. But we're going Marlon Vera by decision. That's the official pick. And next fight up, we have another bantamweight matchup as Mario Bautista is now facing Damon Blackshear, who's stepping in on short notice. He obviously just fought last weekend and cashed a nice submission ticket for us. Easy work against Jose Johnson. I don't think this matchup is going to be nearly as easy because Mario Bautista is a very well-rounded fighter. He pushes a pace on the feet. He can mix in the grappling as well. Lands over 2 takedowns per 15 minutes, whereas Blackshear, primarily a grappler, but really needs to control you by taking the back in a lot of those exchanges. He's not the best wrestler, capable of landing takedowns, but I'd be surprised if he's able to take down and control Bautista here. I think Bautista is going to be the more active fighter in the striking exchanges, and I think Bautista clearly has the better gas tank as well. In the past, we've seen Blackshear really get tired in the fights that do reach the 3rd round, so I'm going to side with Bautista here. I think there's probably an argument for Blackshear as an underdog here, but I'd be surprised to see him pull off the victory. We're going Bautista by decision. That's the official pick. And next fight up, we have Ian Gary, the biggest favorite on the card at minus 500 with Neil Magny stepping in on short notice. He's on the comeback at plus 380. And you guys know I'm not a huge Ian Gary guy. Coming off that impressive 1st round knockout victory over Daniel Rodriguez, though, and I think this isn't the spot to fade him. I tried to fade him with Daniel Rodriguez. It didn't work out. I think this is a better matchup for him against Neil Magny, who I think needs to grapple in this spot, and I'm just not sure I trust him to be able to have any success doing that. He was 0 for 3 on takedowns against Philip Rowe, and I know he won that fight, but I don't think he looked good at all, and he's always been low volume on the feet. I don't think he has a ton of power, and I want to try to fade Gary with guys that can mix in the grappling, which I already said I don't think he's going to be able to do here, and guys that will be able to make him pay for his poor striking defense. And Magny just doesn't have that skill set. So I think this is actually a really good matchup for Ian Gary. I think he probably gets the knockout win. I wouldn't be surprised to see like a club and sub either, because Magny loves to get submitted, and he looks for a way out basically anytime he starts facing adversity. So he's the biggest favorite on the card, but I do think he wins. I think it comes inside the distance. It basically just comes down to whether or not you have the salary to get up to 9,600. I'll be mixing him in whenever I can do that, but I'm not like rearranging my teams just to get up to Gary, if that makes sense. But we're going Gary by TKO. That's the official pick. Which brings us to our co-main event, the first of 2 title bouts, as Zhang Li comes in as a minus 355 favorite. The comeback on Amanda Lemos is plus 280. And this is one where I mentioned I'm interested in Munoz as an underdog in the first fight, not really interested in many other underdogs. I think Amanda Lemos has a case to be a very strong underdog for DraftKings purposes, because if she does win, I think it probably comes by an early knockout. We've seen Zhang get punished for her striking defense in the past. She's been hurt multiple times, knocked out once as well. I think Zhang's going to be the better fighter over 25 minutes or even over 15 minutes if this fight does get extended. But I think she's going to have to eat some pretty big shots from Amanda Lemos, who's one of the more powerful punchers, if not the most powerful puncher in the division. The one concern with Lemos is as the fights do get extended, she clearly starts to slow down. I know she's coming off a third-round finish in her last fight, but I think that's more of an outlier. I still worry about the cardio. I think Weili would be able to take over in the middle to late rounds if the fight does get extended. So this is one I definitely have interest in Lemos as an underdog. I'm going to have exposure to her, but I also think the more likely outcome is that that finish doesn't come early and Weili's able to take over as the fight goes on. We're going Weili by TKO. That's the official pick. Which brings us to our main event as Aljamain Sterling comes in as a minus 258 favorite. The comeback on the Sugar Show, Sean O'Malley, is plus 210. And obviously O'Malley's going to be a really popular underdog pick this week. But I actually think stylistically, this is a pretty brutal matchup for him. He's going to be the better striker, throws at a high rate, has a ton of flashy knockout victories, really fast hands, good boxing combinations. But I think the volume might be a little bit limited early because he's going to be so worried about the takedowns. And that's really been, you know, the way to beat him over the course of his career is you extend him into fights and you force him to grapple. He can be taken down, he can be controlled, and now he's going up against one of the better controlled grapplers at 135. Aljo can mix in the takedowns, and if he takes your back, you're basically not going anywhere. You know, he's got a great back take, clearly has submission upside as well. I think he's really going to force the grappling issue against Sean O'Malley. It's unfortunate because I think it's probably more exciting if we see these guys strike it out on the feet, but I really think he's going to be diving at ankles from the opening bell. I think Sterling gets it done, and it probably comes inside the distance. We're going Aljo defending the belt by submission. That's the official pick. And as always, guys, fightnumbers.com will have my DraftKings player rankings broken down by salary tier. It'll have ownership projections as well. It's completely free. I'll pin it in the comments. As always, appreciate your guys' support. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.